It's my privilege to welcome you and do the introductions and beginning slides here this morning as we talk about our new strategic plan for the RP Group, our strategic plan 2024-2028. So welcome everyone. And I particularly love this slide because I know a lot of the faces on here. These folks were attending Strengthening Student Success, and this is part of my day job crew here at City College of San Francisco. So shout out to those of you who are here on the Zoom today, and welcome to all of you here in the Zoom. So about the RP Group, imagining most of you here are familiar with the RP Group, but just in case, we make sure to cover a few key points. So we are an independent nonprofit. The RP Group conducts research, planning, evaluation, as well as professional development. Hopefully, many of you have been to our conferences, webinars, taken advantage of our research and planning services, evaluation services. We are also a membership organization, and Jake and I are here from your board of directors, and pleased to represent you. So we are going to begin with our land and labor acknowledgements. So as we begin this event, we share our land and labor acknowledgements to bring awareness, increase understanding, and recognize the ongoing damage of colonialism, enslavement, and exploitation that came from the founding of this country. We read these acknowledgements not to be in fashion, but to remind us all that we must honor the original inhabitants of this state and country, be grateful for the land we occupy, and recognize that much of the economic progress and development in this country resulted from the unpaid labor and forced servitude of people of color. The impacts of that violent history are still felt and witnessed today. As our work becomes more informed by the history and culture of Native and exploited people of color, we will update our acknowledgements to reflect our ongoing commitment not only to strengthen our awareness, but to educate the IRPE community and broader California Community College system about historical and contemporary issues in California. These land and labor acknowledgements are a critical step, but only one in our commitment to support Native American students and other groups through research and professional development designed to identify and address their needs, and support our board and staff in their learning about the history and contributions of Native Americans and other people of color in California and this country and the legacy of effects today. Our land and labor acknowledgements to follow may be a bit longer than you have seen in other spaces. For the land acknowledgement, we wanted to go beyond simply naming the tribes on whose land we sit and share some information about these tribes past, present, and future. The labor acknowledgement follows the land acknowledgement as we purposefully chose not to draft a combined land and labor acknowledgement to avoid diminishing any of the groups we honor. To help you follow along visually, we have created slides that highlight key points from each acknowledgement, and we thank you in advance for your attention. We begin with our land acknowledgement. The RP Group acknowledges that in serving the community colleges across the state of California, we operate on the unceded land of over 200 tribal nations. We acknowledge and honor California's First Peoples, the original inhabitants of these various regions, and their descendants, for their resilience, strength, and sovereignty that they continue to demonstrate. Indigenous peoples are not relics of the past. They are still here and continue to demonstrate their gifts, expertise, and contributions to many fields, including the field of education, which brings us all together. I recognize that I reside in San Mateo County, which occupies the Native histories, communities, and lives of the Muwekma, Ohlone, and Ramaytush tribes. The Muwekma and Ramaytush people are part of the Ohlone tribe and are indigenous to the San Francisco Bay Area. The Muwekma Ohlone tribe lived in accordance with the seasons of fishing, hunting, and gathering by moving between village sites annually and engaging in the practice of burning the land to promote native seed and grass growth for animals to forage. The Ohlone Chumash tribe, who were once also called the Costanoans due to the 18th century Spanish conquest, were Christianized by the Spanish and then massacred by California state leadership after the state entered the Union in 1850. The Ramaytush Ohlone homeland includes the San Francisco County, San Mateo County, and part of Santa Clara County areas, with the word Ramaytush deriving from the Chochenyo word meaning people of the West. Today, tribes in the Bay Area are still fighting for federal recognition and stand in defense of contestations to their legitimacies, all while seeking to preserve the unique cultural values and traditions that situate the lineages of their communities. The Ohlone are making an active push for cultural recognition in the city of San Francisco, asking the city for land to build a cultural center as part of proposed shoreline redevelopment, as the area was once the location of a historic Ohlone village and burial site. Now for our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the historical institutionalized policies and practices of the United States to exploit human labor along racial caste lines, beginning with enslaved Africans stolen from their homelands as the labor force to build the colonies, and continuing through the legacy of unfair labor practices imposed upon immigrant and migrant people. These exploitative race-based labor policies and institutional strategies have negatively impacted Indigenous peoples, Chinese immigrants, and migrant workers from Mexico, Central and South America, and the Philippines. In acknowledging our collective debt to their labor and sacrifice, we uplift and celebrate the significant contributions of these communities and their descendants, who continue their legacy of innovation and advancement of racial equity. At each of our events, we will share additional information about the history and impact of one of the groups that were exploited for their labor. This information is not meant to be a complete history of their plight or contributions, but to raise awareness and facilitate respect. Today, we recognize Chinese Americans. More than 50,000 Chinese immigrants lived in California in the late 1850s and were the primary labor force for the Central Pacific Railroad. The grueling and dangerous work and disregard for human health and safety necessitated the demand for more laborers, and tens of thousands of Chinese men were brought to the West Coast as a dehumanized workforce. Race-based fear and propaganda against the Chinese culminated in the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which barred Chinese immigration and denied U.S. citizenship to Chinese nationals and was not repealed until 1943. We recognize and honor the sacrifice and bravery of Chinese people whose labor connected our country in commerce and culture. Finally, we want to share ideas for how you can further your support of Indigenous peoples, as well as learn more about the labor history of the groups we highlighted today. This slide has a QR code for Native Land Digital, a website where you can learn more about Indigenous territories, languages, lands, and ways of life. We encourage everyone to learn more about the land you now occupy and seek ways to support your local tribes with more than just words. We also encourage you to learn more about the labor history of the groups mentioned here. So as you're reading through the slides, just to highlight a few things, you'll notice in that last bullet point, seek to understand what it means to decolonize our practice. And that's something that's going to be a real focus for us going forward at the RP group. And also advocating for students. Again, we're here for the purposes of education, so advocating for students, employees, as well as local communities of color. As we begin our event and segue to why we are sharing this space together today, we want to thank you for joining us in these acknowledgements. We hope that as you spend time in this and other spaces, you will take time to reflect on the history, culture, and contributions of Native and other communities and peoples. Thank you. Right, so the 2024-2028 strategic plan, and I love this cover, all these pictures. I hope that some of you may see yourselves here or see folks that you recognize. So many folks involved in the development of this strategic plan. I want to share an outline for our discussion today. So we'll be talking about the strategic planning process, sharing what our process was for the development of this plan, our updated mission, vision, and values, certainly our goals and strategies, implementation and evaluation, and then we'll end with questions and time for questions and comments. So that is our agenda for the time here today. And I am now going to pass it over to our amazing Executive Director, Darla Cooper.
Thank you, Pam. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. So happy to see so many faces, not so much in your cameras, but in your little box in the chat and in the participant list. We're excited. We hope that by the end of this, you'll be excited to see the direction that we have chosen for the RP group over the next few years. But before we get into that, we wanted to at least share with you how we got here. So we do have a strategic planning committee, and we were able to engage a consultant, Carla Kirk. I never stumbled on her name before today. I say it all the time. We had a lot of fun being the Carla and Darla and confusing everyone with that. But she was wonderful to work with us and walked us through this process. The people you see there on the slide are the members of our board and staff who were on our strategic planning committee, along with our field representative who is with us here today, Dr. Meiske. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here, for all your contributions. Pam, as the board president over the last couple of years, and I chaired the committee, but great group, a lot of time, a lot of effort getting us to this point today. So thank you to everyone on our strategic planning committee. So we started with a lot of intentionality in terms of wanting a strategic plan that embedded equity, diversity, and inclusion instead of having it as a separate goal or even a separate plan. So hopefully we did this. You'll let us know if we missed the mark, but we were very intentional about that. And having that, again, woven throughout and in our efforts to increase our advocacy and our influence within and for the IRPE community and the entire California community college system. The process was very iterative. We had, many drafts, lots of feedback. People had opportunities both within and outside of the organization to give us that feedback. And we are grateful for everyone who did that. So we started our process with these two questions, and I credit our colleague Daniel Miramontes for kind of planting some of the seeds in terms of what would it look like if the RP group were anti-racist, and what would it look like if we were student-centered. And it led to a lot of wonderful, great conversations that ended up being the foundation for our strategic plan. As I mentioned, we had a lot of opportunities for feedback internally, but we also went out to the larger IRPE community. We held a couple of Zoom webinars asking people to come and react to draft versions of our mission, our vision, our values, along with our goals and our strategies that we were considering. So we thank everyone who provided that feedback. And in addition, we did interviews with a handful of system partners to get their feedback on those same things. And I thank all of you partners who participated in that effort and giving of your time to go in depth with us. Those partners were from the Chancellor's Office, the Statewide Academic Senate, the Statewide Student Senate, as well as two of our funders, Lumina Foundation and College Futures Foundation. So that gives you an idea of some of the folks that we asked for feedback. I won't read this to you, but this gives you a basic outline of our timeline in that we started back in February of 2023. And again, what I mentioned, the iterative process in terms of getting different feedback internally and externally. And that led us to our board formally approving the strategic plan this past June, and that's what led us here today. I believe I will be handing it over to our 1 month and 12-day new board president, Jake Kavari, to tell us the specifics of our plan.
Thank you so much for the warm handoff here. And what I will say is I just want to say also that it's great to see all our colleagues here. I know I've been sending a couple of reminders this morning as well, just to be here. So hopefully that caught some of you, and look forward to sharing this. So I already kind of mentioned is just how much intentionality went into this. You could tell from the very beginning to what we're going to cover. So go ahead and we'll go to mission, vision, values first here. And this was already shared a little bit in the very opening here with Pam. So we thank you for that piece. I think this part here to realize everyone is just really the specifics of it. You can see integrating things about equitable student outcomes, ensuring that it's race conscious, equity minded research. And then really the other piece here is to improve institutional effectiveness. So we know the titles that we have and the work that we do, that a lot of times in the work when it comes to research and planning professionals is that we know a lot. You know, when we work outside and people come to our college as well, they know, and also just the highlights of the work that the research and planning group does, thinking of the different things when it comes to the research and throughout the system. So also, I think the part for the vision is to really look at that part and look at that the longstanding injustices that about that is not going to be predictable by student demographics. So we know that those are things that are consistent in data pieces, and we want to ensure that the vision is that it's no longer predictable. I'll let everyone just have a chance to read that fully before we move on, because I think it's important to the framing, because what the next couple slides after this is, or next few slides, is really about how we're going to achieve our mission, right? How we're going to fulfill that throughout. So here's the values that we do. So I think one of the big ones is just looking across here. Something else with the work that we did inside here is what you'll find is that things like race conscious, equitable student outcomes, minoritized and marginalized students are put with inside each one of these. So not just stating it, but also having it inside longer parts. The other two I just wanted to also mention here, that championing equity and anti-racism and centering in student voice. So these are the two, I would say. Other ones were always part of what we've had in our prior ones, but really the focus of and bringing this to the forefront and making sure that it's integrated throughout. So you'll kind of see that throughout all the runs. So here we're going to go into our goals and strategies, and where we're going to kind of spend the meat of our conversation today of fulfilling both the mission, vision, and values of the research and planning group for California Community Colleges. This is the overview of each one of them. So what I will tell everyone is we're going to go through each one of these on our next few slides. So the themes, the inclusion of student voice, which I'm excited about, and putting to the forefront, being a change agent, then growing and sustaining the IRPE community, and then ensuring that EDI centric research. So I'm just going to point out the EDI is first. So through this work, we wanted equity to be first. We've heard that, I don't know how, we've talked about a lot of different times, but it usually you see DEI, and where we want to focus on EDI, having equity at the forefront of the statement. So here's goal one for the inclusion of the student voice. So when we think about the work we do, the barriers that exist that have been created by our system, we want to be intentional in bringing our student voices forward. So through that, the strategies that we're going to have is really to be a model for colleges on how they can integrate that. And then those other steps there is involving students. So one of the big ones too is collaborating with Student Senate. So one thing that has come already with this, last October at Strengthening Student Success Conference, we had Student Senate there as part of our conversation. I can't tell you, having them at our board meeting as a piece of it and listening to them and how we would collaborate and ensure their voice is elevated is something that as an organization, that is just, I know the research has already done that, right? We think about the transfer tipping point, different ones that we've done statewide, but at this point, also how we can further that from a statewide perspective and ensuring that their voice is the forefront in the work that we do. So one of the big other pieces of this is really thinking about how how IRPE is a change agent. So I would say in the work that I've done as a professional, sometimes institutional research or institutional effectiveness was a means of presenting the information, and then having those other areas change it. And what we really were intentional with this one is we already have the research, we have the expertise inside, how do we be a change agent as part of that? So you can see the advocacy for improvements of student success and equity. There's a foundation that the research and planning group has done over its history. And now how do we take those next bold positions as professionals, as an organization? And how do we position also to have IRPE professionals be campus leaders? We are, but we're also impacting that cultural change that is needed to ensure equitable student outcomes, and then being leaders inside our districts and colleges. So our next kind of theme and goal is really growing and sustaining the IRPE community. One of the big ones that came through all our conversations and stuff is really ensuring that there is a robust and diverse pipeline for future researchers and planners and institutional effectiveness professionals. And really, I think one of the pieces here I would just like to mention is the student part about it, is that we can leverage and thinking about our partnerships that you saw with our student senate, and also just we have the students here. So how do we ensure that pipeline exists? And then further through there, we want to ensure also that there's a more equitable community of IRPE professionals. And then to do that, we're going to have to retain the employees as well. So that's one of the parts of it. And then finally, just advancing the levels of leadership and responsibility. We can see that already, I would say, in our field. There's things like accreditation that you see put in our offices. I would say the more recent one is vision aligned reporting as leads as well. So then the next kind of piece is this being at the forefront of this and ensuring equitable student outcome. So finally, goal number 4 is bringing everything together here when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. One of the big pieces is just the evidence-based set of practices. So we have experts all across the state in the work that we do, and bringing that all together to, know how to ensure that we, complete our mission when it comes to equity. Now, one of those big ones is this dismantling racist and other inequitable systems in education. So through our research and the work that we do, there is things that are clear evidence. So I think of things when it comes to academic probation comes to my mind. There's something that just the word in itself that we think about. How do we change that? I know there's colleges already working towards that, and collaborations that can further just change just the word and make sure that students are able to stay on their path. Now, the next things is that we want to integrate our equity, diversity, and inclusion principles throughout all our processes and procedures. So that work, I'm going to expand on that a little bit more about things that we've already kind of done, and both from board committees and also when it comes to the organization. Then we have equity conscious practices. So into the design of just research results. So how do we incorporate that and ensure that it's at the forefront of everything that we do? So I think one thing is to think about our plans as a college. And you can see that now with our organization here, our P group, how we put those together. So finally, I would say that just being experts in equity conscious community college research. So the research and plan group has research, and we want to build upon that and further and scale that work throughout the state in support of our membership organizations. So you can see that kind of last piece there is just integrating the holistic student-centered equity conscious planning. So everything that we do as a college and also as an organization is throughout. And implementation. So one of the biggest things I would say as a professional is just thinking about implementation and evaluation processes. A lot of times plans are made and then those plans are not implemented. And this is definitely something that I know through this whole process, and you saw right before just about the thoughtfulness and intentionality that we did with how we put the plan together. The next kind of piece for us is making sure that it's a kind of a ground up with the organization. So I know We're going to monitor and measure and share our progress with the broader community. So this is an example of that. So right now we're on a webinar. So that regular kind of pieces of annual updates about how far we've come. The next one is the reporting activities by staff and board committee. So I already kind of mentioned this one. There's already action plans put together when it comes to the organization staff. And I also know this next piece right now, the board committees are diving deep into. We just had our board retreat recently, and that was talked about setting goals and ensuring that we're meeting the goal set out in our strategic plan. So then we also are committing ourselves to just measuring our actions. I think one of these pieces is that a lot of times I would say with the researcher hat, at times we have a very, I know through this process, we talked about the quantitative piece that some of us lean towards a little bit more. There is a ton of research and expertise when it comes to qualitative. So we're going to make sure that that piece is incorporated in this strategic plan. And then this will, I think another piece too, as well, just to think about how it's not just a standalone one time, we're not going to look at it again, but you can kind of see it's a living document in the sense that every year we're going to be looking at ourselves and how do we get better, when you can kind of think about the accreditation processes that we already are part of as colleges. We already do that in a lot of ways with the board and also as an organization. So now it's just about scaling that and ensuring that we follow through and then bring those stories and elevate the student voice in that whole process. We do have questions and comments now, because I think we wanted to make sure there's enough space to not just speak to everyone for an hour, but also create opportunities for people to have this. So I just want to thank everyone at this, as we open this up, for their involvement. So you saw those individuals that were on our committees. And I would also say that we've held things like this as part of this process that was, to me, just really great, that it wasn't just one step and we were done, but actually had people incorporated throughout this whole process. So with that, I think we can start taking in questions and comments.
So there's a question in the chat. Thank you, Luis. How will the RP group solicit or incentivize student feedback as part of the strategic plan feedback and assessment process? And Jake was sharing that we have already begun involving Student Senate, statewide Student Senate, so they were able to see our strategic plan as it was developing in October, and so we involved them early in those meetings and in those conversations, as well as looking at their strategic plan and what they're working on, and making sure that we really are listening to where they're headed while we are charting the course organizationally for the RP group. So that will certainly be an ongoing avenue, the statewide academic senate. And I know that there are processes in place already for the research and planning and assessment work that the organization does. I don't know if Darla or others want to speak to that, but it's certainly something that we'll be mindful of. And I imagine that we will be explicit about it as well, so that folks can mirror those kinds of practices as well if they want to do that with their own colleges.
Yeah, I would only add, Pam, that's a great question and a great reminder. Because obviously, I mean, if you've gone to any of our professional development, there's often a survey, if not always a survey. So we get that information from the professionals, right, who attend our different events. I can say last year at our Strengthening Student Success Conference, we did actually have a meeting with the students who were in attendance there, trying to learn, from them, even though that conference isn't necessarily designed for students, what feedback they had, what because they're somewhat seen behind the curtain, right? They're being invited into a space that they're not normally invited in, where we are professionally developing. And it was interesting in terms of their exposure to what we talk about amongst ourselves. And so I think we can continue to get that feedback from students who do participate in our events, and just to make sure that I know we do all this for the students, but we can oftentimes, when they're not in the room, to represent themselves, I think we can sometimes go a little off track.
So this is a great plan. Thanks for sharing that and putting it together. I do have a question. I see with a lot of new emerging technology, and I see with adopting and adapting new and changing practices, how RP is going to be handling primarily related to research evaluation, the implementation of new technology, and what does those innovations look like, and where does that fit of adopting and adapting innovation into your plan?
I guess I'll respond to that. Even if it's not called out specifically, I think we are highly aware of, I mean, AI alone is everywhere. And we, at least among the staff, we've had conversations about it, how to do our work. I think that is an area that we need to probably start doing more. We've had a couple of peer-to-peers related to AI in the research field, but I think that is an area that we probably need to devote a bit more time and attention to, and we may call on you, Aaron, as one of the people we've already called on in this area. But it's a great point about making sure that the technology is incorporated throughout, that we are looking at technology as the tool that it is, not to, plan for it, but to use it to plan. And so I appreciate you calling our attention to that and making sure that we are aware. But I agree that I know I myself have had questions about how does AI show up in, obviously within the RP group. And again, we had a whole staff meeting, or at least part of a staff meeting devoted to that, and looking at and people sharing how they're already using it and people getting ideas. I think we might need to potentially take that model out into the IRPE community and have more and more people share how they're using AI to do their research and planning and institutional effectiveness. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
I'll share that the peer-to-peer we have coming up next month is focused on using technology with respect to planning. So basically mapping all the planning components across the district. San Bernardino Community College District and Christopher Crew is going to be sharing the great work that he's done with respect to using this platform. I believe it's Cascade is what he's been using. And I think this is going to be a great opportunity to show how we can, I guess, technologize planning rather than it being the reports that can often sit on a desk or on somebody's hard drive somewhere, and having it being this living, breathing component that everybody's logging into on a daily basis and seeing what their measurables are across specific goals and tasks. So we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on planning as well, and I'm excited about that offering coming up here next month.
So I like the strategic plan, but I'm a little baffled by what is not in the plan. And that may be because it's much more complicated than what you laid out. It looks like you're wanting to develop a strategic alliance with key anti-racist groups within the community colleges, with students through the Student Senate, and certainly developing the capacity of researchers and planners. What about strategic alliances with faculty and administrators and staff? Where does that fall? And finally, where does learning come in terms of the research function for this strategic plan? That is to say, enlivening and enlightening faculty and staff about what is and what is not working in the classroom.
So in terms of a few thoughts off the top, and I also see that there's a question in the chat that I think is somewhat related. Clearly, we want to put the students first, right? Student voice, elevating the student voice. It's part of our strategic plan, and it's something that those of us at currently in colleges and districts it's been a focus of our local work as well. So really fleshing out how we're doing that, making it more systematic, making it more intentional, making it more visible is part of the work of the strategic plan. So we don't have all the answers yet as to how we'll do that, because that's part of what we're developing over the next period of time. That doesn't mean that none of the other partners matter. And one of the ways that we do bring other folks into this space is through our strategic advisors on the board. And I see at least one of them here in the room today. There may be more, but they've been more and more active in our meetings, and we're trying to make very good use of the folks who do attend our board meetings, and those are representing the CEOs, the chief instructional officers, chief student services officers. We also have CISOA representation now as well. So really creating that conversation between our organizations around what we're focused on, how we can collaborate, where those opportunities are. I failed to mention Academic Senate. Obviously, that is certainly a major partner for us as well. So Statewide Academic Senate has a role as a strategic advisor. We also have folks from the RP group attend Academic Senate meetings. So there's a lot of partnership built in there. That's kind of on a broad level. I see the question in the chat around specifics in terms of taking bold positions, and that may be in association with other organizations or perhaps out front ourselves. We're actually engaged right now in learning how to be better and clearer advocates. So again, that's part of the work going forward. You've certainly seen places where we've taken a role where our research has been out front, and actually want to acknowledge our own executive director, Darla Cooper, who is taking a role statewide on transfer work and being part of that transfer conversation as an extension of the African American Transfer Tipping Point, but other work that the organization has done as well. So we are stepping into those spaces more. You will see that more coming up. Jake or Darla, if you want to add before we move on to other questions to anything that I just shared.
I was just going to answer Mark's question in the chat about previous ones to share. The one that came to mind off the top of my head is on academic probation that Jake referred to earlier, where we have taken a position that it needs to change, starting with the name. That name has to go. That's not acceptable to be aligned with criminal justice in our education. But we're also advocating that you don't just stop at changing the name, but really examine your policies and your practices. And right now, the way most academic probation policy and processes are implemented are very similar to a criminal justice system, where you take people's rights away and you make them jump through a bunch of hoops to prove that they still belong as a member of society. That's what a lot of our processes are not really designed to help students return to good standing. They're more about continuing to weed students out of our systems because they quote unquote don't belong. So that's one off the top, but I want to make sure we get to Natalia and Michael.
And real quick before, I just wanted to point out too, I was looking through just from the about all like groups at your college. If you go to goal 4 as well, so if you go back a slide, it actually is inside there about putting evidence-based set of practices for students, faculty, staff, and establish universal design principles. So support everyone. So I think that's another piece as well, that it is laid inside our goal number 4. So I just wanted to put that as the last question. So Natalia, did you want to go?
Yes, thank you so much. First off, excellent work, especially the collaboration that you all have had, the incorporation of community members and the insights of your practices as research group to be able to have an upcoming plan. So my question is related to your values. I really, really like the values that you laid out here, especially the one that is about championship equity and anti-racism. I really applaud you for being committed to really eliminating and eradicating racial injustice and inequities. So how do you plan to really make that happen? I saw goal 4 and it's related to equity, diversity, and professional development, but we know that we are under very extreme circumstances related to social oppression and related to how different systems are continue oppressing others and marginalization. So how, as an organization, you plan to support the conversations on cultural competencies in students' climate in areas that will really support practitioners to understand how to be more student-centered and stop blaming the students for their outcomes when the system is pretty much pushing them through that. So how those values are going to be come to reality. And I know throughout your research, you do a lot of research and planning to go on these, but is it something that you are going to start to do some strands and professional development on those areas, or you will partner with the Chancellor Office to offer that? I just want a very tangible type of ideas here, because that's an area that I know that we all should be focusing on.
Thank you so much for that question. And I think there's a couple different avenues that you brought up inside there that you already mentioned. One of the big ones, I would say, I think, Darla, I'll put over there a little bit just from the climate perspective, because there is stuff coming from an organization perspective of assisting. So you can think of some of the ones that you think of, like the National Assessment, of collegial colleges. I always, the acronym NACCC, it's longer than ever, but the point being is some of those surveys, not as quickly as we'd like to have. So I think that that's where we can position ourselves as a membership organization to provide specific ones. So Darla, do you want to expand on that one a little bit more than me speak to the organization side of it in operations?
Well, I don't want to steal too much of our thunder, but we've been working for the past year or so on coming up with just stay tuned for that. There'll be more information coming very soon.
You froze up, Darla, so I know we didn't want to speak too much of it right when you were speaking to that one, but in any case, the idea is that it is on the forefront of that. It's been acknowledged from just how we operate and giving us a grounding and baseline data so we can actually compare across and then learn from each other. I think that's one of the strengths of the research and planning group, just being a membership one, so we can lean. I think the peer-to-peer shows, I think Brad brought up a couple examples, and you also think, I'll just also speak to Summer Institute's a good example as well. There's professional development that's specifically geared towards that for us as professionals, about how to be a change agent, how to be a leader inside those spaces, and creating community and spaces for you to lean on each other. I think that's important. And then that vision aligned reporting question that was in the chat as well. I just want you to know that we do, as board and exec pieces, we meet with the IDEA office of the Chancellor's office, and we collaborate on these types of things. And there's more things to come with that as well, just to address about increasing communication. It's upon us. And then we have our regional rep model to help with that too as well. So I think knowing your regional rep is an important part of that, so they can bring those things to the board. And they do. I just want to tell you, the regional reps that are on the board have brought this forward for things like these big policies and big things from a statewide perspective. So Michael, I want to give you an opportunity. You've had your hand up for way too long at this point. So go ahead if you'd like to go.
Yes, thank you. Michael Davinia here, San Jose City College. I want to just say I appreciate all the effort and the care and the work that has gone into developing this strategic plan. It's clear that a lot of thought has gone into this. And I wanted to make a suggestion that one way to actually use AI with this plan is to give it to, say, Copilot, and ask Copilot for recommendations for this plan. How would you highlight certain areas? Which areas would you focus on? Are there any areas that are missed by this plan? Any areas that should be included in this strategic plan for California Community Colleges growth and development? Then another thing I would ask AI is, for this, I'd feed it the whole strategic plan. Ask AI, what areas of data collection would you recommend to feed into this strategic plan and see what happens. AI comes up with amazing things. And I think it's a way to actually implement AI, to work with the plan and get some ideas from out there. AI has so much that it's gathering and sifting and sorting. So I think you could really find something useful using AI with this plan. The other thing I want to commend is the work on reframing and readdressing academic probation, academic dismissal, all of those terms, all of the processes involved in that. We need to bring in much more compassion and way of supporting students through it to help students find their path to success, not shut them out. Just be inclusive and open the doors. So it's got to open more doors, be more compassionate. And thank you. Appreciate this this session, this way of getting together and presenting the plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, and great feedback for us to take into consideration. And I know there's also another one in the chat that I'm happy to address about other collaborations with other CC organizations. The answer is yes to that one. I think of things like the chief technology officer stuff that we've already done. So when it comes to student information systems and pieces like that, we have to build those relationships as well. So that is part of the work that we do. Pam or Darla, do you want to add anything to that question? I just know that it's an ongoing thing as new things come down, get appointed to different statewide committees, and we ensure that the communication pieces are coming back and that we're representing in the sense of, to put forward our concerns and also our expertise. I think is another piece for us is just as professionals, we have a expertise. I think that's part, like Michael, you're explaining here with some of the AI pieces that has already been brought up about how we can leverage these ones. We're useful, right? And that's another piece about it, why we be advocates of our field.
I also want to acknowledge Aaron's comment / suggestion in the chat about doing some kind of a map or a crosswalk. Because you're right. I mean, we were having this problem of trying to say, well, does this strategy go here or there, or but this is that, or is it duplicative? Is it worth it? So I appreciate that.
Cool. I think a lot of that, especially with a lot of our planning, things are not like standalone. They're so integrated and blending together. And while we wish we had infinite resources across all of our institutions, organizations, and the like, I feel that if we have those points to say, how do we work together towards that common outcome, it makes things not just meaningful, but it really helps draw that vision to fruition.
And I would say this to add to it, just is that we've already kind of started with mapping, like I already kind of mentioned, our committees and also on the organizational side, just the goal and then the work that is inside there. So I think we'll have a lot more as we start reporting out on this and having crosswalks and pieces. I think soon when we start seeing some of those trends, we'll be able to maybe combine, or maybe there's something we also missed, right? That is completely outside that we need to add something. So I think that's the iterative process of this. So it's not just here it is, we're going to do this for 3 years, 4 years, and we're done. This is going to be something that's just evolving. I mean, you could kind of make a tie back to AI. It's going to be evolving in real time versus just waiting.
Quick comment. I think many schools are concerned about the changes for Calculus 1 and how this is going to affect students. So I think addressing that, collecting data from, say, when the day that AB 1705 starts, which is, I think we're looking at fall 2025, when these changes go into effect, and students will have much broader access to taking the Calculus 1 course, to alert colleges to really be aware of data collection and collect the right data. And so just focus on understanding the results that come out of that major change, let's say.
Yeah, and that does fit underneath that goal 4 and 1 part about, and I think that's the scaling of it, the kind of what's working where and how it is, and then sharing that across the state. So it's right to that point.
I loved goal 1, and I think AI is a very interesting tool and a great resource for both students and researchers to have. I would caution the RP group, or just us as RP professionals, I guess, like going to AI before we go to students.
So it's a great dropping the mic situation, because I'll just say this, going through this process, it's not as if when you do goals, I always say this with planning at my college, like you have 1 through 4, and then it's in order, right? Like there's a 1, so it's like just like the gold medal or something. There's a 1, but that's not how this actually works. But we still were intentional in making sure the student voice was first, because that's what's driving us at the core. So I agree with you that just from why we're here. I think that if the big question here is our why is our students, right, and ensuring that we remove the barriers, and then they're able to go on and get whatever dreams and aspirations that they have, but it's upon us to make sure that we change that and really be student centered, right? I mean, be student ready. That's the key piece.
About preparing students to comfortably and use AI in the workforce. I think that's one of our goals. We're looking at San Jose City College, we have a course, Mathematics for Technical Fields, but we're looking at changing it to AI and Mathematics for Technical Fields, to prepare students to be comfortable using AI and to see how to use AI in a lot of areas in their future roles in the workforce.
Yeah, and that's the thing with technology change, right? It's throughout time, things come and go. I think about even computers, everyone just assumes we have them in our phones, but it has changed and we're more effective, right? And we can leverage and be more productive. I just wanted to thank everyone, all the leadership that's inside this group as well, for all the work and where we got to at this point, and also everyone on this call. So we look forward to continued conversations just like these ones at future ones. So thank you so much.